Thinking is an important part of our human experience, and one that has captivated people for centuries. Today, it is one area of psychological study. What is intelligence, and why does it differ from person to person? Are street smarts a kind of intelligence? What does an IQ test really measure? This presentation will focus on high-level cognitive processes. We will consider thinking and explore the development and use of language. We will discuss problem solving and creativity. And we will finally discuss how intelligence is measured and how our biology and environments interact to affect intelligence. What is cognition? Upon waking up in the morning, you begin thinking, contemplating the tasks that you must complete that day. What do you do first? Second? Third? Can you get them done before you have to be at work? Or maybe during your lunch? Or do you have to wait till you get off work? These thoughts are one example of cognition at work. Cognitive psychology is a field of psychology dedicated to examining how people think. It attempts to explain how and why we think the way we do. Cognitive psychologists strive to determine and measure different types of intelligence. Why some people are better at problem solving than others, and how emotional intelligence affects success in the workplace. They also focus on how we organize thoughts and information gathered from our environments into meaningful categories. Concepts, prototypes, and schemata. Concepts are categories or groupings of linguistic information, images, ideas, or memories, such as life experiences. You use concepts to see the relationships among the different elements of your experiences and to keep the information in your mind organized and accessible. Concepts are informed by our semantic memory and are present in every aspect of our lives. Concepts can be complex and abstract, just like justice, or more concrete, like types of birds. Some concepts, like tolerance, are agreed upon by many people because they have been used in various ways over many years. Other concepts, like the characteristics of your ideal friend or your family's birthday traditions, are personal and individualized. In this way, concepts touch every aspect of our lives, from our many daily routines to the guiding principles behind the way various governments function. Identification of prototypes are another technique your brain uses to organize information for the concepts you have developed. A prototype is the best example or representation of a concept. For example, in the category of civil disobedience, Rosa Parks' peaceful resistance to segregation on a city bus in Montgomery, Alabama, is a recognizable example of civil disobedience. Just as concepts can be abstract or concrete, we can make a distinction between concepts that are functions of our direct experience with the world and those that are more artificial in nature. In psychology, concepts can be divided into two categories: natural and artificial. Natural concepts are created naturally through your experience and can be developed from either direct or indirect experiences. For example, you might have had some direct experience with snow, watched it fall from the sky, shoveled it, thrown snowballs, etc. You know what it looks like, smells like, tastes like, and feels like. Or do you know snow maybe from indirect experience? Seeing pictures of falling snow, or watching films that feature snow in a setting. Either way, snow is a natural concept because you can construct an understanding of it through direct observations or experiences. An artificial concept is a term used by psychologists to describe one of the ways our brains organize information into categories. Artificial concepts are categorized by our brains in this way when they have defining features. For example, a square is a concept, and this is used to describe objects which have four right angles and 4 equal sides. If an object does not meet these exact requirements, then it is not a square. This is an artificial concept and is one of the easiest concepts to learn. The use of artificial concepts to define an idea is crucial to communicating with others and engaging in complex thought. According to Goldstone and Kirsten, concepts act as building blocks and can be connected in countless combinations to create complex thoughts. Schemata: cognitive frameworks that help us to organize and interpret information. They are developed through experience and can affect our cognitive processing. In terms of cognition and development, Paget views schemas as the basic unit or building block of intelligent behavior. The principal function of cognitive schemata is to formulate, test, and execute behavioral plans. It exists in 2 forms: processes of individual decision-making and the organizational process. In this section, you are introduced to cognitive psychology, which is the study of cognition, or the brain's ability to think, perceive, plan, analyze, and remember. Concepts and their corresponding prototypes helps us quickly organize our thinking by creating categories into which we can sort new information. We also develop schemata, which are clusters of related concepts. Some schemata involve routines of thought and behavior, and these help us function properly in various situations without having to think twice about them. Schemata show up in social situations and routines of daily behavior. Language: a system that involves using words and systematic rules to organize those words to transmit information from one individual to another. Be it spoken, signed, or written, language has specific components: a lexicon and a grammar. A lexicon refers to the words of a given language. Thus, lexicon is a language's vocabulary. Grammar refers to the set of rules that are used to convey meaning through the use of the lexicon. For instance, English grammar dictates that most verbs receive an ed at the end to indicate past tense. Words are formed by combining the various phonemes that make up the language. A phoneme is a basic sound unit of a given language, and different languages have different sets of phonemes. Phonemes are combined to form morphemes, which are the smallest units of language that convey some type of meaning. We use semantics and syntax to construct language. Semantics and syntax are part of a language's grammar. Semantics refers to the process by which we derive meaning from morphemes and words. Syntax refers to the way words are organized into sentences. What is language development? Language development is a process through which children acquire the ability to process speech and communicate. Given the complexity of a language, one might expect that mastering a language would be an especially arduous task. Indeed, for those of us trying to learn a second language as adults, this might seem to be true. It certainly did with me after spending 7 years trying to become fluent in Spanish in my 40s. However, young children master language very quickly with relative ease. This chapter talks about 2 men who have different views on language development, B.F. Skinner and Noam Chomsky. B.F. Skinner's theory was based on his beliefs of how behavior and actions could be controlled by their consequences. He believed that positive reinforcement was successful within children's education as it encouraged them to try their best and complete work to their best potential. Reinforcement can be positive or negative, whether it be praise with a sticker or threatened with punishment such as detention. It can help children choose their actions and behavior correctly. Within his early stages of experimenting with this theory, Skinner studied animals such as rats and pigeons. During his experiments, he created the Skinner box, which was a simple cage-like box with which the animal was placed in. This box allowed Skinner to prove the success of positive reinforcement as the animal learned that they would receive food with the press of a button within the box. Later, this method was proven to work on humans, especially children. It has become obvious that the use of positive reinforcement, such as praise, with children encourages them to learn and develop. Skinner believed this was effective with prompting a baby during the process of learning to talk. He believed that when a parent praises a child when a random babble sounds close to an English word, it encouraged them to repeat the sounds. On the other hand, when the irrelevant sounds of a baby are ignored, it's extinguished and forgotten about. Noam Chomsky, however, disagrees with Skinner's theory relating to children's learning and development, as he believes that humans are born with a basic knowledge of language and don't have to learn it from fresh. Chomsky believes that language is biologically inherited, whereas Skinner's theory is based on how a child learns how to talk through the use of positive reinforcement from adults who already speak a language fluently. This also goes against Skinner's belief of how the use of praise and reward with children in fact does not help them learn. Chomsky's theory disagrees with Skinner's method of positive reinforcement, as Chomsky believes that the use of praise and rewards doesn't assist a child's development nor encourage them to learn. He, however, considers that each child is born with a language template which is developed throughout their education. This goes against Skinner's theory, as he believes that a baby's random babbles don't have any links to a language until they are encouraged through positive reinforcement by adults to form noises which sound like proper words. In my opinion, I believe that both theories have different aspects which are true. I believe that Skinner could have been correct in saying that if children are praised for making babbling noises that sound like words, it definitely encourages the child to making the sound again. Through the child repeating the sound, it will develop until it becomes a recognizable word. On the other hand, I also believe that what Chomsky's theory says about a human being born with a capacity in the brain for language to also be a good thought. However, I'm not sure whether I think it's true. I do believe that if a child isn't exposed to language before a certain age, that they will no longer be able to learn how to talk. I came to believe this due to my research on Jeannie, the Pharaoh child, who was talked about in this chapter. Children begin to learn about language from a very early age. In fact, it appears that this is occurring even before we are born. Newborns show preference for their mother's voice and appear to be able to discriminate between the mother's voice and other people's voices. This table shows 7 stages of language and communication development. Stage 1 happens between 0 and 3 months, and there you see reflexive communication. Now, what reflexive communication means is that the child has involuntary movements, sounds, or facial expressions in response to pleasure or discomfort. And then we have stage 2, which goes between 3 and 8 months. And you still have that reflexive communication, that involuntary movement, and those facial expressions. But you also have, they also start showing interest in others. Then you have stage 3, which is between 8 and 13 months. And then they have intentional communication. They're trying to talk to you. They're starting to be more social. And then 12 to 18 months, you start hearing those first words. Mama, daddy, no. And then 18 to 24 months, they start forming sentences of 2 words. And then between stage 6, between 2 and 3 years, sentences of 3 or more words. And then stage 7, 3 to 5 years and beyond, complex sentences, and they actually have conversations. Psychologists have long investigated the question on whether language shapes thoughts and actions, or whether our thoughts and beliefs shape our language. 2 researchers, Edward Safir and Benjamin Lee Whorf, began this investigation in the 1940s. They wanted to understand how the language habits of a community encourage members of that community to interpret language in particular. Sapir and Whorf proposed that language determines thought, suggesting, for example, that a person whose community language did not have past tense verbs would be challenged to think about the past. Researchers have since identified this view as too absolute, pointing out the lack of empiricism behind what Sapir and Whorf proposed. Today, psychologists continue to study and debate the relationship between language and thought. When we speak one language, we agree that words are representations of ideas, people, places, and events. The given language that children learn is connected to their culture and surroundings. Language may influence the way that we think, an idea known as linguistic determination. Linguistic determination is the concept that language and its structures limit and determine human knowledge or thought, as well as thought processes such as categorization, memory, and perception. Proponents of linguistic determination argue that such differences between languages influence the ways people think, perhaps the ways in which whole cultures are organized. An example of this is that the Eskimo language, because of the frozen environment where it originated, has many words for snow that describes whether it is wet, dry, blowing, heavy, light, etc., while in English we have only one word for it. In addition, those who speak more than one language see the world differently. Numerous studies have shown that a new language can change how the human mind pulls information together, hence enabling bilinguals and even multilinguals to have more than one perspective on a particular issue. But the bottom line is the same. Languages don't limit our ability to perceive the world or to think about the world. Rather, they focus our attention and thought on specific aspects of the world. Language is a communication system that has both a lexicon and a system of grammar. Language acquisition occurs naturally and effortlessly during the early stages of life, and this acquisition occurs in a predictable sequence for individuals around the world. Language has a strong influence on thought, and the concept of how language may influence cognition remains an area of study and debate in psychology. In cognitive psychology, the term problem solving refers to the mental process that people go through to discover, analyze, and solve problems. A problem exists when there is a goal that we want to achieve, but the process by which we will achieve it is not obvious to us. Put another way, there is something that we want to occur in our life, yet we are not immediately certain how to make it happen. Maybe you want a better relationship with your spouse or another family member, but you're not sure how to improve it. Or you want to start a business but are unsure of what steps to take. Problem solving helps you figure out how to achieve these desires. Before you can start solving a problem, it's important that you first understand the exact nature of the problem. If your understanding of the issue is faulty, your attempts to resolve it will also be incorrect or faulty. This table lists 3 different problem-solving strategies. The first one, trial and error, is an approach to problem solving that involves trying a number of potential solutions to a particular issue, then ruling out those that do not work. If you're not sure whether to buy a shirt in blue or green, for instance, you may try on each before deciding which one to purchase. This can be a good strategy to use if you have a limited number of solutions available. But if there are many different choices available, narrowing down the possible options using another problem-solving technique can be helpful before attempting trial and error. Another one, the second one, is called algorithms. An algorithm is a step-by-step procedure that, by following certain rules, produces a solution. Algorithms are commonly used in mathematics to solve division or multiplication problems, but they can be used in other fields as well. In psychology, algorithms can be used to help identify individuals with a greater risk of mental health issues. For instance, research suggests that certain algorithms might help us recognize children with an elevated risk of suicide or self-harm. One benefit of algorithms is that they guarantee an accurate answer. However, they aren't always the best approach to problem solving, in part because detecting patterns can be incredibly time consuming. The third item on the list is heuristics. Heuristics are shortcut strategies that people can use to solve a problem at hand. These rule of thumb approaches allow you to simplify complex problems, reducing the total number of possible solutions to a more manageable set. If you find yourself sitting in a traffic jam, for example, you may quickly consider other routes, taking one to get moving once again. When shopping for a new car, you might think back to a prior experience when negotiating got you a lower price, then employ the same tactics. While heuristics may be helpful when facing smaller issues, major decisions shouldn't necessarily be made using shortcut approach. Heuristics also don't guarantee an effective solution, such as when trying to drive around a traffic jam only to find yourself on an equally crowded route. Not all problems are successfully solved, however. What challenges stop us from successfully solving a problem? Albert Einstein once said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result." Imagine a person in a room that has four doorways. One doorway that has always been open in the past is now locked. The person, accustomed to exiting the room by that particular doorway, keeps trying to get out through the same doorway even though the other three doorways are open. The person is stuck, but she just needs to go to another doorway instead of trying to get out through the locked doorway. That person that didn't try the other three doorways had what's called a mental set, which is a tendency to only use solutions that have worked in the past rather than looking for alternative ideas. A mental set can work as a heuristic, making it a useful problem-solving tool. However, mental sets can also lead to inflexibility, making it more difficult to find effective solutions. When dealing with a problem, sometimes people can make assumptions about the constraints and obstacles that prevent certain solutions. In that case, in the past, all those other doorways were locked and that one doorway was open. But that condition has changed. But she did not even try some potential options. And that's what happens when you make an assumptions about the constraints and obstacles that prevent certain solutions. Functional fixedness refers to the tendency to view problems only in their customary manner. Functional fixedness prevents people from fully seeing all the different options that might be available to find a solution. For example, during the Apollo 13 mission to the Moon, NASA engineers at Mission Control had to overcome functional fixedness to save the lives of the astronauts aboard the spacecraft. An explosion in a module of the spacecraft damaged multiple systems. The astronauts were in danger of being poisoned by rising levels of carbon dioxide because of problems with the carbon dioxide filters. The engineers found a way for the astronauts to use spare plastic bags, tape, and air hoses to create a makeshift air filter which saved the lives of the astronauts. Although people like to believe that they are rational and logical, the fact is that we are continually under the influence of cognitive biases. These biases distort thinking, influence belief, and sway the decisions and judgments that people make each and every day. The anchoring bias is a tendency to be overly influenced by the first piece of information that we hear. Some examples of how this works, are the first number voiced during a price negotiation typically becomes the anchoring point from which all further negotiations are based. Or hearing a random number can influence estimates on completely unrelated topics. Doctors can become susceptible to the anchoring bias when diagnosing patients. The physician's first impressions of the patient often create an anchoring point that can sometimes incorrectly influence all subsequent diagnostic assessments. While the existence of the anchoring bias is well documented, its causes are still not fully understood. Some research suggests that the source of the anchor information may play a role. Other factors, such as priming and mood, also appear to have an influence. Like other cognitive biases, anchoring can have an effect on the decisions you make each day. For instance, it can influence how much you're willing to pay for your home. However, it can sometimes lead to poor choices and make it more difficult for people to consider other factors that might also be important. The confirmation bias is the tendency to listen more often to information that confirms our existing beliefs. Through this bias, people tend to favor information that reinforces the things they already think or believe. Some examples include only paying attention to information that confirms your belief about issues such as gun control and global warming, or only following people on social media who share your viewpoints, or choosing news sources that present stories that support your views, or not considering all the facts in a logical and rational manner. There are a few reasons why this happens. One is that only seeking to confirm existing opinions helps limit mental resources we need to use when making decisions. It also helps protect self-esteem by making people feel that their beliefs are accurate. People on two sides of an issue can listen to the same story and walk away with different interpretations that they feel validates their existing points of view. This is often indicative that the confirmation bias is working to bias their opinions. The problem with this is that it can lead to poor choices, an inability to listen to opposing views, or even contribute to labeling people who hold different opinions as not fitting in within the norms of a social group. The hindsight bias is a common cognitive bias that involves the tendency to see events, even random ones, as more predictable than they are. It is also commonly referred to as the "I knew it all along" phenomenon. Some examples: insisting that you knew who was going to win a football game once the event was over, or believing that you knew all along that one political candidate was going to win an election, or saying that you knew you weren't going to win after losing a coin toss. In one classic psychology experiment, college students were asked to predict whether they thought then nominee Clarence Thomas would be confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Prior to the Senate vote, 58% of the students thought Thomas would be confirmed. The students were polled again following Thomas's confirmation, and a whopping 78% of the students said they had believed Thomas would be confirmed. The hindsight bias occurs for a combination of reasons, including our ability to misremember previous predictions, our tendency to view events as inevitable, and our tendency to believe we could have foreseen certain events. The effect of this bias is that it causes us to overestimate our ability to predict events. This can sometimes lead people to take unwise risks. Many different strategies exist for solving problems. Typical strategies include trial and error, applying algorithms, and using heuristics. To solve a large, complicated problem, it often helps to break the problem into smaller steps that can be accomplished individually, leading to an overall solution. Roadblocks to problem solving include a mental set, functional fixedness, and various biases that can cloud decision making skills. In this next section, we are going to try and answer the question, what are intelligence and creativity? Intelligence is defined as thinking skills and the ability to adapt to and learn from life's everyday experiences. Yes, it is measurable. For measuring intelligence, the standard and most widely accepted method is by measuring a person's intelligence quotient, or IQ. Defining and classifying intelligence is extremely complicated. Theories of intelligence range from having one general intelligence to certain primary mental abilities and to multiple category specific intelligences. British psychologist Charles Spearman, for example, believed intelligence consisted of one general factor called G, which could be measured and compared among individuals. Spearman focused on the commonalities among various intellectual abilities and de-emphasized what made each unique. In the 1940s, Raymond Cattell proposed a theory of intelligence that divided general intelligence into two components, crystallized and fluid intelligences. Crystallized intelligence is characterized as acquired knowledge and the ability to retrieve it. When you learn, remember, and recall information, you're using crystallized intelligence. You use crystallized intelligence all the time in your coursework by demonstrating that you have mastered the information covered in the course. Fluid intelligence encompasses the ability to see complex relationships and solve problems. Navigating your way home after being detoured onto an unfamiliar route because of road construction would draw upon your fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence helps you tackle complex, abstract challenges in your daily life, whereas crystallized intelligence helps you overcome concrete, straightforward problems. Robert Sternberg developed another theory of intelligence, which he titled the triarchic theory of intelligence because it sees intelligence as comprised of three parts: practical, analytical, and creative intelligence. Practical intelligence, as proposed by Sternberg, is sometimes compared to street smarts. Being practical means you find solutions that work in your everyday life by applying knowledge based on your experiences. This type of intelligence appears to be separate from traditional understanding of IQ. Individuals who score high on practical intelligence may or may not have comparable scores in creative and analytical intelligence. Analytical intelligence is closely aligned with academic problem solving and computations, demonstrated by an ability to analyze, evaluate, judge, compare, and contrast. Reading, science, math utilize this type of intelligence. Creative intelligence is marked by inventing or imagining a solution to a problem or situation. Creativity in this realm can include finding a novel solution to an unexpected problem or producing a beautiful work of art or well-developed short story. Howard Gardner, a Harvard psychologist, developed multiple intelligence theory. In Gardner's theory, each person possesses at least 8 intelligences: linguistic, logical mathematical, musical, bodily kinetic, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. Linguistic intelligence perceives different functions of language, different sounds and meanings of words, may easily learn multiple languages. The representative career for them might be a journalist, a novelist, a poet, or a teacher. The logical mathematical intelligence is capable of seeing numerical patterns, has a strong ability to use reason and logic. Their representative career might be a scientist or a mathematician. Musical intelligence understands and appreciates rhythm, pitch, and tone, and may play multiple instruments or perform as a vocalist. Their representative career might be that of a composer or a performer. The bodily kinesthetic intelligence has a high ability to control the movements of the body and use the body to perform various physical tasks. Their representative career might be as a dancer or an athlete, or even an athletic coach or a yoga instructor. Spatial intelligence has the ability to perceive the relationship between objects and how they move in space. Their representative career might be a choreographer, or a sculptor, an architect, an aviator, or even a sailor. Interpersonal intelligence has the ability to understand and be sensitive to the various emotional states of others. Representative career might be a counselor, a social worker, or salesperson. Interpersonal intelligence has the ability to access personal feelings and motivation and use them to direct behavior and reach personal goals. Their representative careers might be a clergy member, or a theologian, or a program planner, a counselor, a researcher, an entrepreneur, even a farmer. Naturalist intelligence has a high capacity to appreciate the natural world and interact with the species within it. Their representative career might be a biologist or an ecologist or an environmentalist. Gardner's inter and interpersonal intelligence are often combined into a single type called emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence encompasses the ability to understand the emotions of yourself and others, show empathy, understand social relationships on cues, and regulate your own emotions and respond in culturally appropriate ways. People with high emotional intelligence typically have well-developed social skills. Some researchers argue that emotional intelligence is a better predictor of success than traditional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has been widely debated, with researchers pointing out inconsistencies in how it is defined and described, as well as questioning results of studies on a subject that is difficult to measure and study empirically. Creativity, the ability to generate, create, or discover new ideas, solutions, and possibilities. Although creativity is often associated with the arts, it is actually a vital form of intelligence that drives people in many disciplines to discover something new. Creativity is often assessed as a function of one's ability to engage in divergent thinking. Divergent thinking can be described as thinking outside the box. It allows an individual to arrive at unique, multiple solutions to a given problem. In contrast, convergent thinking describes the ability to provide a correct or well-established answer or solution to a problem. Intelligence is a complex characteristic of cognition. Many theories have been developed to explain what intelligence is and how it works. Sternberg generated his triarchic theory of intelligence, whereas Gardner posits that intelligence is comprised of many factors. Still others focus on the importance of emotional intelligence. Finally, creativity seems to be a facet of intelligence, but it is extremely difficult to measure objectively. Measures of intelligence. What does IQ mean? What do intelligence tests measure? How are they scored? How are they developed? Human understanding of intelligence is somewhat limited when we focus on traditional or academic type intelligence. How then can intelligence be tested? And when we measure intelligence, how do we ensure that we capture what we're really trying to measure? In other words, that IQ tests function as valid measures of intelligence. Reliable intelligence testing. Reliability refers to the test's ability to produce consistent results, began in earnest during the 1900s with a researcher named Alfred Binet. Binet was asked by the French government to develop an intelligence test to use on children to determine which ones might have difficulty in school. It included many verbally based tasks. The page on the picture is from a 1908 version of Binet's test. Children were being asked which face of each pair was prettier. Louis Terman, a Stanford professor, modified Binet's work by standardizing the administration of the test and tested thousands of different aged children to establish an average score for each age. As a result, the test was normed and standardized, which means that the test was administered consistently to a large enough representative sample of the population that the range of scores resulted in a bell curve. Standardization means that the manner of administration, scoring, and interpretation of results is consistent. Norming involves giving a test to a large population so data can be collected comparing groups such as age groups. The resulting data provide norms, or referential scores, by which to interpret future scores. Norms are not expectations of what a given group should know, but a demonstration of what that group does know. Norming and standardizing the test ensures that the new scores are reliable. This new version of the test was called the Stanford-Binet Intelligence Scale. Remarkably, an updated version of this test is still widely used today. In 1939, David Wechsler developed a new IQ test in the United States. Wechsler believed that intelligence encompassed the global capacity of a person to act purposefully, to think rationally, and to deal effectively with his environment. Wechsler combined several subtests from other intelligence tests used between 1880 and World War I, and these subtests tapped into a variety of verbal and nonverbal skills. He named the test the Wechsler-Bellevue Intelligence Scale, and this combination of subtests became one of the most extensively used intelligence tests in the history of psychology. The results of intelligence tests follow the bell curve, a graph in the general shape of a bell. The bell curve is a common type of distribution for a variable, also known as the normal distribution. The term bell curve originates from the fact that the graph used to depict a normal distribution consists of a symmetrical bell-shaped curve. The highest point on the curve, or the top of the bell, represents the most probable event in a series of data, its mean, mode, and median in this case, while all other possible occurrences are symmetrically distributed around the mean, creating a downward sloping curve on each side of the peak. The width of the bell curve is described by its standard deviation. Individuals earn a score called an intelligence quotient, or IQ. Over the years, different types of IQ tests have evolved, but the way scores are interpreted remains the same. The average IQ score on an IQ test is 100. The standard deviation is a measure of the amount of variation or dispersion of a set of values. A low standard deviation indicates that the values tend to be close to the mean of the set, while a high standard deviation indicates that the values are spread out over a wider range. In modern IQ testing, one standard deviation is 15 points. So a score of 85 would be described as one standard deviation below the mean. Any IQ score that falls within one standard deviation above or below the mean between 85 and 115 is considered average, and 82% of the population have IQ scores in this range. An IQ score of 130 or above is considered a superior level. The trick to finding a bell curve in nature is to use a large sample size. Without a large sample size, it is less likely that the bell curve will represent the wider population. In addition to sample size, it needs to be a representative sample, which is a subset of data that can portray similar characteristics. Representative sampling helps you analyze larger populations because the data generated contains smaller, more manageable versions of the larger group. For example, a classroom of 30 students with 15 males and 15 females could generate a representative sample that might include 6 students, 3 males, and 3 females. So, why measure intelligence? Well, we administer tests of intelligence to inform us about how well a student can think. The value of IQ testing is most evident in educational or clinical settings. Children who seem to be experiencing learning difficulties or severe behavioral problems can be tested to ascertain whether the child's difficulties can be partly attributed to an IQ score that is significantly different from the mean for her age group. Without IQ testing or another measure of intelligence, children and adults needing extra support might not be identified effectively. IQ testing is used in courts as well to determine whether a defendant has special or extenuating circumstances that preclude him from participating in some way in a trial. In this section, we learned about the history of intelligence testing and some of the challenges regarding intelligence testing. Intelligence tests began in earnest with Binet. Wechsler later developed intelligence tests that are still in use today, the WAIS 4 and the WISC 5. The bell curve shows the range of scores that encompasses average intelligence as well as standard deviations. The source of intelligence. Let me tell you a story. A young girl, born of teenage parents, lives with her grandmother in rural Mississippi. They are poor, in serious poverty, but they do their best to get by with what they have. She learns to read when she is just 3 years old. As she grows older, she longs to live with her mother, who now resides in Wisconsin. She moves there at the age of 6 years. At 9 years of age, she is raped. During the next several years, several male relatives repeatedly molest her. Her life unravels. She turns to drugs and sex to fill the deep, lonely void inside her. Her mother then sends her to Nashville to live with her father, who imposes strict behavioral expectations upon her, and over time, her wild life settles once again. She begins to experience success in school, and at 19 years old becomes the youngest and first African American female news anchor. The woman, Oprah Winfrey, goes on to become a media giant, known for both her intelligence and her empathy. High intelligence. Nature or nurture? Where does high intelligence come from? Some researchers believe that intelligence is a trait inherited from a person's parents. Other psychologists believe that intelligence is shaped by a child's developmental environment. The reality is that aspects of each idea are probably correct. In fact, one study suggests that although genetics seem to be in control of the level of intelligence, the environmental influences provide both stability and change to trigger manifestation of cognitive abilities. Range of reaction is the theory that each person responds to the environment in a unique way based on his or her genetic makeup. According to this idea, your genetic potential is a fixed quantity, but whether you reach your full intellectual potential is dependent upon the environmental stimulation you experience, especially in childhood. Another challenge to determining origins of high intelligence is the confounding nature of our human social structures. It is troubling to note that some ethnic groups perform better on IQ tests than others, and it is likely that the results do not have much to do with the quality of each ethnic group's intellect. The same is true for socio-economic status. Children who live in poverty experience more pervasive daily stress than children who do not worry about the basic needs of safety, shelter, and food. These worries can negatively affect how the brain functions and develops, causing a dip in IQ scores. In 1969, educational psychologist Arthur Jensen posited that intelligence was made up of two types of abilities, Level 1 and Level 2. Jensen published the article How Much Can We Boost IQ and Achievement in the Harvard Educational Review in 1969. He administered IQ tests to diverse groups of students, and his results led him to the conclusion that IQ is determined by genetics. He also posited that intelligence was made of two types of abilities, Level 1 and Level 2. Level 1 is responsible for route memorization and remain consistent among the human race. Level 2 is responsible for conceptual and analytical abilities and exhibited differences among ethnic groups. Just as most controversial conclusion was that Level 2 intelligence is prevalent among the Asians, the Caucasians, and the African Americans. Learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are cognitive disorders that affect different areas of cognition, particularly language or reading. Learning disabilities are not the same thing as intellectual disabilities. Learning disabilities are considered specific neurological impairments rather than global intellectual or developmental disabilities. Genetics and environment affect intelligence and the challenges of certain learning disabilities. The intelligence levels of all individuals seem to benefit from rich stimulation in their early environments. Highly intelligent individuals, however, may have a built-in resiliency that allows them to overcome difficult obstacles in their upbringing. Learning disabilities can cause major challenges for children who are learning to read and write. Unlike developmental disabilities, learning disabilities are strictly neurological in nature and are not related to intelligence levels. Students with dyslexia, for example, may have extreme difficulty learning to read, but their intelligence levels are typically average or above average. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation. Thinking and intelligence is a fascinating topic, and I enjoyed putting this presentation together. I also enjoyed this class very much. Thank you again.